Hello and welcome to the Extraordinary Retirement Podcast with your hosts, Gregg Indovina and Nate Yeomans. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hello, fellas. How are you?
We are
Doing
doing
fantastic. How are you, Wendy?
fantastic.
Oh, good, good. It's the middle of summer and, are we all having a good summer? It's nice and hot like it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Having a fantastic summer. I've got my nephew Alex with us today, which is kind of exciting to have our first guest join us to listen in. And Alex is probably a little bummed because his summer is about to come to an end. He starts his senior year of high school in about a week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, summer is coming to an end for him. But
Oh,
yeah, I
so
think
you're showing them the ropes. You're showing them what it's like to be a big time financial advisor.
Well, I think that part of the reason for the visit is he's trying to figure out what direction he's going to go when he gets into college, right? And he's a very smart young man, and he's got a lot of opportunity, and so he's trying to figure out what in the world does he do with the rest of his life, which, by the way, is not that much different than somebody transitioning into retirement. Right.
Exactly.
It's
Yep.
retirement is not the end of something. It's the beginning of something new. And so, Alex, that's what you get to figure out next is what are you going to do to better your life moving forward? Right.
Yep.
Pretty
We
exciting.
always talk about retirement as a blank piece of paper, and you get to create the life that you want to live. And same thing for youngsters. They, get to do the same thing. So it's kind of a nice parallel there.
Except youngsters don't use the term youngsters.
That's true.
Very true.
I'm a boomer. I'm a boomer, according to my kids. So I don't know. That's not very complimentary when your kid calls you boomer, is it?
Hey, boomer. No, that's not complimentary.
That's not complimentary. I thought that was a compliment. Oh boy. All right. I got to sit them down.
Okay. So, ironically, we're talking about the Life Manifesto. Is that what we're talking about?
The Return on Life Manifesto. So yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about the evolution of the financial services industry, and then we're going to get into a manifesto that has 4 different bullet points about how do you transition from thinking about return on investment to actually something that truly matters, which is return on life. But let's first start with the evolution of the financial services industry. Nate, I don't know if you know all of this, but my first job in this industry was with Merrill Lynch, and it was I shouldn't say completely, but it was mostly product driven. In other words, do you need a product? I have a product to solve a very specific problem, and as long as it was a suitable product, there was a potential match and a client financial advisor relationship. And that was a commission-based type of world, whether it was making trades for somebody or selling an insurance product or a structured product that Merrill Lynch offered. That was the old school way of doing business. And then we've seen the industry evolve into financial planning and using products and investments as in a supporting role. And that was primarily answering the question, are you going to have enough money? Do you have enough money? Is your plan on track to reach certain goals, such as retirement? And that was better because instead of putting products at the center of the conversation, we were putting money at the center of the conversation, but that wasn't quite good enough. And the industry is now going through a new we're going through a new transition
to justify a product, right?
Exactly. It was just some basic planning just to get the products or the investments under management. And now, Nate, we're into a new world that is being adopted slowly, and we are certainly on board with this new paradigm, and that is a life-centered financial planning approach. And that is looking to answer the question, are you managing your money in a way that is improving your life? And what we're now talking about is putting the client's life at the center of the conversation, with the planning going around that. And then around that are the products that support the overall plan. A totally different shift.
Yeah, it's just a way to completely change the conversation. This is at the end of the day about what does somebody want to get out of their life, and are they using this thing called money. And that this in financial industries, obviously, we're all very focused on growing money and we're focused on return on investment. And it's ingrained in everyone's mind from the day that you start investing on what returns am I getting. But at the end of the day, we got to understand, Greg, that money's just a tool, isn't it?
That's all it is.
It's
It
just a
is.
tool. And if
Yeah.
we're not using that tool and have a way of measuring how do I use this money that I've saved for all my life to turn that into something that is giving me a return, not on just investment, but on the life that I want to live. That's what the Return on Life Manifesto is really about, is saying, let's put the client in the middle and focus on their life and what they want to achieve with it. And the money and products and all of those things are just tools to help them accomplish that goal.
Yeah. And the industry right now is predominantly still centered and focused on money at the center of the conversation. Not that money and return on money and all those other things is not important, but you can be I always say this, that retirement is not just simply a financial event. You can have all the money to never run out of money in your entire life, and you can be absolutely miserable during retirement if you don't have these other conversations around what's the money for, how do we use it to improve our life. And that leads us into the Return on Life Manifesto. And you kind of hinted at the first one, Nate, and that is that money is just a tool, right? You really have to ask the question, what is the end? It's not, it's the means to an end. You first have to identify what is the end. And then probably more importantly, how do you know that you're progressing towards that end?
Yep.
Just because you beat the S&P by 0.5% in any given year says nothing about whether or not your money is being used as a tool to make your life better.
Yeah, which is point number 2 in the manifesto, is comparing to indexes or other people's rates of return, et cetera, is actually a really poor measure. You know, the old saying is the Standard and Poor's is a very poor measure of your success. And it's really about looking at are you getting the returns you need, and is the money doing what you need to do to support the life that you want to live and the impact that you want to have on this new chapter in your life and this thing called retirement. And so
and the
want to be
financial
very careful
services
about benchmarking and comparing the right things. And the industry a lot of times wants to benchmark money and the movement of markets, which is not always the right path.
No, and the value proposition for most financial service professionals is that I'm going to do better with your money than the guy down the street. Well, that may very well be true, but are you really helping to use that money to improve their life? I always say benchmark the beach house, right? Benchmark a goal, whatever that happens to be, and then track that progress. But that's not the only thing that we can benchmark.
Yeah, and that benchmark is personal for everybody, right, Greg? I mean, this is not something that everybody has the exact same benchmark. Everybody has different goals in life, other things that drive them, that provide value and purpose to them that they want to achieve with their money, whether it's their legacy or other types of things. And so it's going to be really important that everybody really starts to get focused on what is my benchmark. What are the things that I should be comparing towards to make sure that you're getting the return on life that you're looking for, and that we have a appropriate benchmark? Because, like I said, it's not always the stock market that we need to be comparing things to. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's an old saying, Nate. Nothing improves or gets better if you don't first sit down and decide to measure it. And what do you measure? And how do you track that progress over time? And this is not just about the return on your investments. It's a return on various areas of your life, which we'll get into here in the fourth point of the manifesto. So let's dive into that. Nate, I'll just lay it out in the 3 different time frames, and you can dive into the first one. Return on life is really about understanding someone's past, their present, and their future. And the past is really understanding your relationship with money. And there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 different areas that we like to measure. Why don't you walk through those for us?
Well, I mean, the first would be debt. Number one, are you in debt? And then how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
It's very different for individuals. Some are very adverse to being in debt, and they're not comfortable with that. And sometimes we'll use the example of when somebody retires, do you want to have your home paid off? And I actually literally had this conversation last week with a client, and the conversation went like this. I know that I can afford the mortgage payment that I have. It's not causing a problem, but it's driving me crazy every single month that I make that interest payment and I see how much interest I'm paying the bank. And it was literally bothering this individual. They had no problem financially. They were not going to run out of money because of it. There was no issues, but it was a psychological thing that they're like, this is driving me crazy. And so guess what? We wanted to focus on the fact and identify that this was causing a problem emotionally for this individual. So let's figure out a plan to end up divesting some of the investments that they had and paying off the mortgage so that they were completely done with that and making sure that that was going to work for them. And so we want to understand that to where somebody else might be perfectly fine with having that mortgage. And it's not a big deal.
And that stems to how you were raised. How was money treated in your family as a kid? Was it fear-based? Was it abundance-based? All those kinds of things. And understanding your relationship with money in terms of debt is super important. Another one would be savings. How important is savings to you on a scale of, say, 1 to 10? And then how well are you doing against that standard?
Yep.
And understanding that.
Spending would tie right into that, wouldn't it? So that's another piece is that you've got debt, you've got savings, but how much are you spending? Are you spending enough or too much? And what's that sweet spot for you to be able to say, okay, I want to live the life that I want to live and be able to spend the right amount? And how do you feel about those things? But we can keep going from there, because the other areas that are important that we find understanding people's beliefs on these things would be like giving.
Okay? Yeah, what's your philosophy on giving? And then how well are you doing versus that? Maybe you don't have a big desire to give and you're not giving much, so you're in alignment. But what if you're out of alignment?
Yeah, sometimes we find this is that while somebody's working and earning a paycheck, they're giving on a frequent basis, whether it's to their church or charity or whatever, and it's just a part of normal life. And then all of a sudden they retire and they're reliant on their own paycheck, and they're like, oh, the giving, does that need to stop? Because now I'm not earning money elsewhere, and it starts to bother them. And it's like, no, we still need to be intentional about giving if that's who you are and that's what you believe. If not, then we need to know that we can take that that sort of thing out of the budget. Next would be how does somebody feel about risk?
And then is there a disconnect between what their philosophy is towards risk and the actual amount of risk they're taking? And Nate, we run into this all the time. People come in to visit us after attending our retirement class, and they give us a sense that they're moderately conservative and they're worried about the market, this, that, and the other. And we do an analysis of their portfolio, and we tell them, within the next 6 months, do you realize that it is very statistically possible that your portfolio could lose this percent, which then equates to this amount of money? And they about fall out of their chair.
Yeah.
And that disconnect needs to be identified and it needs to be fixed. Same thing with the view of retirement.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the bigger ones is that retirement is a different definition for everybody. And, it's this interesting thing because, people spend most of their lives, and here Alex is trying to figure out what he wants to do. What is his vocation going to be when he gets through college, and what's he going to do for work? And it's going to spend the vast majority of his life. And most of our clients have been, spend 30, 40 years in their vocation And now they're just expected to go 100% vacation with a flip of a switch.
Oh, it's fun for a couple of months, Nate, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
And then you lose your mind.
Exactly. And so that definition of retirement is different for everybody. Some people have no problem with that thought or that idea. I would say most, though, after a few months, they are really struggling with now their new identity, their new purpose, because it's really hard to go 100% from your vocation to vacation. And it's about saying, how do we blend those two together and start having a better balance over time?
And that gets back to the overall premise of this whole return on life conversation. You could have all the great return on investments that lead up to a financially successful retirement. And if you don't have the measurements of return on life in place, which we're going to go into next, you can be unhappy. And we see that a lot, and we help people fix that. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. So one measurement for current
Wendy,
life.
what are you going to be when you grow up? Have you figured that out?
I'm going to be a pro pickleball player.
There you
Ooh,
go.
I like that. I like that. Maybe we'll sponsor you.
A long way to go.
You and me both.
All right.
So measuring your current life is a good way to start, right?
So instead of measuring return on investments, which is very easy, how do you measure return on life? And Nate, go through just real quick, some of the areas that we like to work with clients on to measure, and not just measure actually with hard numbers, so that we can track that progress over time. The areas that we like to measure for our clients over time.
Yeah. So those areas are number one would be work. And so how happy are you with the work you do? And are you getting fulfilled with that work you do? Because one, there are people out there that work is a means to an end, and they absolutely hate their job and they're counting down the days. But I find there's also probably more people that really enjoy a lot of the elements and the components to the work that they do. And so we'd have to ask the question, do you want to give that up entirely? Or is there a way for you to continue to do some of that type of work that you enjoy, even in this thing called retirement? And so work is one thing.
And let's give an example. What about, let's give an example. So you start to work with somebody and we say, we're going to capture something beyond return on investments. We're going to capture this concept of return on work. And so we say, Wendy, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfying is your current role in work? And you say it's a 4. Okay. And we say, okay, well, that's not good. What can we do to improve that?
Yeah.
And an example might be, go to your employer and say, instead of working 50 hours a week, I'm only going to do 30. And that's what I want to do. Or we had a client that we recently worked with that started to do a job share with another individual, and her return on life score went up significantly because she wasn't the only person working her job, and she was not working full time anymore. And that's an example of measuring return on work objectively today, and then putting plans in place that involve your money and your assets. It always involves money to improve that.
Yeah, I work from home, so that's a huge return on life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not having to drive to the office every day. So yeah, I mean, you have to think of these things that are going to add to your life rather than frustrate you to death.
But what if you had to drive 45 minutes in traffic each way every day to go do a job that you love, but you hated the commute?
Been there.
And you and then we said, we worked with you to say, all right, what's a way to do maybe a different job or restructure your job so that you can work from home and avoid the most unpleasant part? That is the return on work metric that we're trying to measure.
Quick story on that is, Greg, we just had a client recently that joined us, and it literally kept me up at night when we first started meeting, because one of the first comments in our introductory conversations as we were going through the process of getting to know each other, et cetera, she made the comment that every time that I go to work, I am just realizing how unhappy I am, and I just dread it the entire commute there. And you just got to take a step back and go, oh my gosh, like every day that you go into work that you are that unhappy, we got to figure something different. And through our planning process, we were able to show her that she actually can retire right now. And next month is her last month of work, which is very, very exciting. But to see all of a sudden that stress come off of her, to realize, oh wait, I don't have to do this anymore. Now, it doesn't mean that she's not going to want to do something,
Sure.
but she doesn't have to do that. And something that was bringing her, a lot of misery, to be honest with you. And she wasn't feeling appreciated. And there's a lot of things that dive into that. And so just being able to have that conversation to identify that is going to improve the return on her life significantly.
But
Now, moving on to that is,
imagine under the old paradigm, though, you go to a financial advisor who never even asks you about how work is for you.
yeah.
And you spend year after year after year talking about how great the portfolio is doing relative
And that
to
you got to hit a certain number to retire.
Relative to a benchmark that doesn't matter. And it's just absolutely futile. So what's the next area that we like to measure return on life progress, Nate?
What about where you're living?
Yeah.
What about your residence, where you're living? Is that where you want to be? And there is a certain point in time to where we all realize that, okay, am I going to want to deal with these stairs later in life, or is this the area that I want to retire in? Do I see that happening? And if
am I close enough to the grandkids?
Yeah, or maybe it is the place that you want, but you just hate the floors. Right. And it's just every day I walk in and it's like, ugh, maybe it's time to remodel. Maybe it's time to do some things so that you're getting a return on your life of when you walk in that door, you just are happy because you spend most of your time in your home, and it should bring happiness to your life. And so it's understanding things like that.
Or maybe you love your house, but you really can't afford it. And it's a huge stressor on you each and every month.
Yeah.
Whenever that mortgage is due, you just cringe.
Yep.
Those are other areas.
Yeah. Return on leisure would be another one. Are you doing the things and able to go out and have the fun that you would like to have in the manner that you would like to have it, and understanding, okay, what return am I getting there? Or can I be more intentional about getting involved in activities or clubs or other groups with things that I enjoy? Because sometimes there's a barrier to entry when what we find is that when somebody's spent a lot of their life working and maybe didn't have as much time to go out and do things that they enjoy, so they kind of started to lose a little bit of touch with something. It's like, well, I used to do that a lot, but got really busy with life and family and work. And I just haven't done it for years. And the barrier to entry is, how do I go get involved in that again? Yeah. And so sometimes it's breaking down. So Wendy, for example, let's use pickleball. I know you're a big pickleball player, but for somebody that wants to say, gosh, that sounds like a lot of fun, but where do I get started? Right. And there's a lot of great groups and to join and clubs to be a part of, to be able to start to say, okay, I can get introduced and I can now start to break that barrier to entry so that I don't feel uncomfortable going and trying new things to have fun. And so that's always a big piece.
What about measuring the return on health? And how are you using your money to improve the quality of your health, which is probably the number one thing that makes one happy? You can beat the S&P every year and have all the money in the world, but if you have low back pain that you can't get under control, your overall return on life is going to be low. So how do you use that money to go out and make yourself healthier?
That's right.
It could be
body in motion stays in motion, right?
Yeah, that's just one example, but and then return on relationships. I'm gonna tie three together. So let's say, Wendy, when did you start pickleball?
How long ago?
Yeah,
like 4 years ago.
Okay, so let's say 4 years ago we were sitting down in an advisor-client relationship, and we identified that you had some health concerns. You thought maybe you were being a little bit too sedentary. You would like to increase the scope of friendships that you have out there. and you wanted to have some more things, fun things to do from a leisure standpoint. Well, those are 3 areas that we like to measure: return on leisure, return on health, return on relationships. If we identified pickleball and got you involved, and 4 years later, every time we talk to you, you talk about frickin' pickleball, right? I would imagine that the objective measures on leisure, health, and relationships have gone up because the decision to go and spend a little bit of money to learn and play pickleball. That's the perfect example of what we're talking about to improve one's return on life, not just their investments.
Yeah, and relationships is a big one. I mean, I think you can look at a lot of different studies that show that having a sense of community in retirement is incredibly important. And one of the things that most people missed about maybe work is not always the things, the job they did, but it was the people that they were around sometimes. And so having that community and different forms of leisure like pickleball or other types of activities can really connect the two of those dots.
Yeah, I have to say that I have met literally hundreds of people playing pickleball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where, the benefits just keep coming.
Absolutely. And it just opens up a whole new life. And that's exciting. That's really, really exciting, especially for somebody that's transitioning into a new phase of their life to think about, okay, what am I retiring to, not from? And I can continue to gain new relationships and have a sense of community. And there's a lot. I mean, we use pickleball a lot because obviously it's a very popular sport today, but there are so many of those things that we could add to that list. The other thing is, Greg, is never stop learning.
Return on learning. I
That's
always
right.
want to continue to learn. And there's certain things I want to learn how to play guitar, right? That's on my, so those are kind of things that we like to measure. You might want to tell a story of a recent retiree that's doing something completely different that you mentioned to me yesterday, a client of ours.
Yeah, I think it's one of the coolest ideas, but it's trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do in this next phase of life? And
after working 70 hours a week for 40 years.
Yes. And said, you know what, I might go to blacksmith school.
It's awesome.
And I might just learn how, and it's a 14-month program. And I might, you know what? That is fantastic.
Go for it.
And what I loved was the tone of voice and the eagerness and the kind of curiosity about it, which is, by the way, kind of this similar conversation that I'm having with Alex in the office this week, is this kind of this attitude of curiosity and exploring and trying to figure what things would be like if he went and learned this. And it doesn't stop just because you're retired. In fact, it's a great opportunity to continue to learn and say, you know what, I've put this off for long enough. Now it's time to go learn something new. And it might be something entirely different, which has a lot of excitement to it. Yeah. And so we're real excited about that one. So.
Well, so return on life is understanding your past relationship with money, understanding and tracking the progress in these various areas that we just talked about moving forward to track your return on life. The final piece of it is understanding and planning for future life transitions, both ones that are planned, like being an empty nester, etc., and maybe things that are not planned, but you need to account for. And Nate, I think we just end here on this.
Yeah. So I think
we'll hold those other topics for another time.
We've got so much material here that I think we could do multiple shows, and we are going to continue to do this. We got some exciting interviews coming up, et cetera. And so stay tuned, because we're going to dive deeper on this. But today is really about giving you a kind of a good overview. But, understanding, future life transitions, whether it's, number one would be family transitions. Are there any big family transitions coming up? And maybe it would be with yourselves personally and making a move to, we've had several clients that retired and moved to new states, went to different areas of the country, whether it was to be closer to the grandkids, et cetera. But that's a big transition, right? It can be an exciting one to get done right. Or it could be your son or your daughter's getting married. Different things to be intentional about. Family transitions is a big one to plan for.
Absolutely.
What else, Greg?
The next transition to to contemplate and to plan for various transitions would be health related transitions. No one ever plans on having health issues, but it's something that you need to understand and have a financial plan and backing. Whether it's a long-term care is probably the classic one. Is what if we need care outside? We can't care for ourselves in the home anymore. What does that look like? And how do our investment assets support checking that box on the transition of potentially going into long-term care?
Yeah, and I find that for a lot of people, it's this thing that just kind of looms over their head.
Yeah.
You ever had something that just kind of looming over your head that you don't? It's like the fear of the unknown, and it just kind of always in the back of your mind, and it just bothers you and bothers you, and then all of a sudden one day you do something about it, or you figure out a plan for it, and then all of a sudden it's not bothering you anymore. And that's one of those areas that we don't know what's going to happen in healthcare from a healthcare perspective for every individual, but we can talk about in the event that XYZ happens, here's how you're going to handle it. And it's just a way to say, okay, let's not have this loom over our head anymore. We've got a plan in place.
Yeah.
And
Another transition to plan and understand is work. Are you switching jobs? What if you get laid off? What if you get an offer? What if you get a buyout package? How do you handle that situation?
we've got a few clients right now that are hoping for that buyout package. I mean, what a great way to retire is they pay you to retire.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, where do I sign up? I'm trying to get that done. But
Yeah. Why is Fred's attitude so poor lately? Why is he always late for meetings?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the
but
different
also
work transitions.
It's not always just a flipping the switch. You work one day and the next day you're fully retired. I think for a lot is how do I phase into retirement? And creating that balance, which is really the next one is what does retirement look like?
Yeah. That's a whole
Whole nother
podcast.
topic. And honestly, retirement is, I think it's a challenge because a lot of times it's talked about almost like it's the end of something.
Well, it's a horrible
And
word.
it is, and the exact opposite of way to think about it, right? And when retirement was actually created, obviously the Social Security system was put in place, and there's ways to incentivize people to stop working so that the younger workforce would have job opportunities. And there's a whole lot that we could go into it. But the life expectancy when this whole idea around retirement was created was not very long. That certainly wasn't expected for you to figure out how am I going to go and make up a new life over the next 25, 30, 35 years. And so retirement generally was thought of as the end. And today it's the beginning of something brand new. And so really reframing that in your mind is incredibly important about what you're retiring to, not from.
What about planning for a life transition in the financial realm? Maybe it's a sale of a business at some point in the future. Maybe it's a potential inheritance. Maybe it's a lawsuit that you're going through, right? All those kinds of things are transitions that you have to plan for and be ready for, and make sure that your nest egg is prepared to deal with those various financial transitions. And the final one, Nate, is one of your favorite.
Would be giving. And this is a topic that we've really made I think an impact with a lot of our clients is opening up the idea of whether you're charitably inclined or you want to make sure that the kids have something. We talk a lot of times about, would you rather give with a warm hand or a cold hand? And that giving can be done intentionally over time while you're alive. It's not just an event that maybe happens when you're no longer here. And that can bring a whole nother level of excitement and fulfillment to giving. And we're working with clients currently on actually giving plans that we're being very intentional about today, because they know they're not going to run out of money, and they'd rather see the impact of that money that they're giving today and get fulfillment from that instead of waiting until they're no longer here. And so planning for that sort of thing, I think, becomes really important. And we see an increase in the return on life when we do all of that.
This
So
return on life manifesto is really introducing a potentially new and better conversation with a financial advisor, and that is putting the client's life at the center of the conversation. And money, although return on investment certainly is important, and risk management and asset, all those things are important. It's how is that money being used to support and build the life that the client wants to live. That is what we're shooting for with this life-centered approach to financial planning. And it's been super well received. We've kind of always done this. We've kind of formalized it recently, Nate, with some of these new tools and things to track progress. But it's nice to sit down with a client after working with them for a couple of years and show them the progress in areas around their health and their relationships and learning, residence and retirement, all these things. And then they feel like, yeah, my money is actually doing what it's designed to do. And that is to not be the means, but be the end. Help support
and
the
at the
end.
end of the day, Greg, is that we'll all come to the end of our life one day. And if you look back on your life, I can't imagine that one day I'll sit there and go, gosh, I wish that in this year I would have gotten a little higher rate of return. So, but I promise you, might be able to think about the things that I am very happy that I did or wish I would have done. And so we're really trying to change that conversation to focus on, let's maximize the return on life and let's be intentional about it. And the other piece to this, to wrap up, is accountability, right? We can be a partner alongside somebody to help them be accountable in, okay, here's areas where you say you want to get a better return on life. What are we going to do about it? And let's give you the confidence to go out and take action on that. And that's what this is really all about. So we hope to kind of unpack this more over future episodes here. But it's an exciting conversation that I think needs to be had more often. That's for sure.
Okay. So if people have more questions, how do they get in touch with you guys?
Best way to go to our website, designwealthadvisors.com. designwealthadvisors.com, or you can call our office at 720-833-7676.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.